webinar. Recording this webinar, all of the slides that we're going to show you and some handouts around some easy guides will also be sent to all participants and those that have registered today. So thanks very much for joining us, and it's 8 o'clock by me, so let's crack on. So it would be remiss of me not to say that the last 15-18 months have been extremely tough for many businesses. The great news is, without wishing to dwell on the past, that clearly there is very strong growth amongst a lot of our clients, which is great news. Some are reporting unprecedented sales levels, which is very, very encouraging. And what we want to talk to you about this morning, I've got a great panel of my team that are joining me, and we want to talk to you this morning about achieving further growth through people. Clearly getting a plan in place for next year, 2022, if you haven't done so already, is pretty much a priority, I would have thought, at the moment. So if you need some assistance with that, we can certainly help you going forwards. I'm going to show you a little bit this morning about what we do as an organisation. Some of you may know of us already, some of you we may be unfamiliar to you. Hopefully at the end of the 45-minute session, you'll have a bit of more of a picture about what we do and how we can help you. So I'm just going to run through a quick slide deck. There's 8 in total. I'm going to show you 7, of which this is 1. So nice and brief, but this will be made available to you post webinar. So if I can hit the right button, we'll move the slides on. So who are we? We're a team of ex-board level HR directors that have stepped out of corporate careers, and we work with SMEs or mid-tier businesses. We provide affordable HR expertise. It's that ability to operate at a strategic level, but also to roll our sleeves up and be your HR director at an operational level that most of our clients really value. It is absolutely on a part-time basis. It's completely flexible, and you use us when you need us, which is great. There's no ties. You can switch us on and switch us off as you choose, which means you can scale up and down as needed. So you're not tied into something. And I think that's, again, quite an important point to make. We provide that support and guidance every step of the way. We're a critical friend and someone that you can rely on to support you in your business as you're making plans, employing further people, and getting the most out of your workforce. So what do we do? There's a table there of the sorts of things that we get involved in. This, again, is available on our website if you wanted to delve into a little bit more detail. The big piece, of course, is HR strategy and people planning for growth. Organizational design absolutely fits in with that. Some of you may wish to restructure. You may be thinking about what your structure looks like for next year, and implementing changes. Change management is a big piece of the people journey. We do quite a lot of leadership and management coaching and one-to-one executive coaching as well. A number of our team are qualified executive coaches, and that's very much a part of the service. We did a recent survey, and 42% of our respondents claimed that recruiting talent was probably their biggest people challenge and holding them back from growth. So talent management, attracting the right people, recruiting and developing is all part of what we do. Another big part, culture and engagement, which leads, of course, to productivity. Productivity equals profit. So again, we're very big on understanding culture, making interventions that improve engagement and ultimately impact the bottom line. As I mentioned, we operate certainly at a daily level with helping solve those people problems that might arise. There may be some challenging employees that you're not sure how to deal with, or there may be some recruitment that you want some assistance with, or some daily operational things that come up. And again, we're there to support you. I'm not going to go through all these, but you get a flavour of the sorts of things that we would support you with should you engage with us. So how do we go about doing that? The important thing here, of course, is that you get your own HR director. That relationship is critical. We appoint someone that's appropriate for your business, that's got the appropriate skills and experience to help you achieve your aspirations and your growth plans. And we start off typically with what we call a discovery diagnostic, and that's a real deep dive into the business, 2, 3, 4 days, depending on the size of the organization. And that gives us a really good flavor an idea of what's going on in the organization, both what's working well and also the sorts of things that you need assistance on that we can provide. Most of the organizations we work with, they're not in crisis mode, they're in growth mode. And our support helps to accelerate that growth. Number 2 on there, on the wheel, is resolving urgent issues. You may have a particular challenge that you'd like us to sort out that we uncover as a result of the discovery diagnostic, and we can get that sorted for you as soon as possible. But the important thing, 3 and 4, developing a plan, making sure that equals success, and equally as important, we actually stay with you and implement the ideas and recommendations that we make. As I say, that's done on a part-time basis, and that flexibility is down to the ambitions of the organization, where it is in terms of its maturity of systems and processes, and not least, how much physical support that you need. An interesting table on the right of this slide is, this comes from the Gallup UK Workforce Survey. Businesses with engaged employees are 21% more profitable, 17% more productive, and have 41% lower absenteeism. That's scientifically proven. That's not our figures, that's Gallup, the worldwide global workforce survey company. So unsurprisingly, part of our strategy is to make sure that there is a real engagement piece associated with the plan. So moving on. Today's webinar, the title, How Helping Businesses Achieve Growth Through Their People by Developing a People Strategy that Supports Your Growth Plans, Creating a Focused and Strong Leadership Team to deliver those plans, Attracting, Training, and of course, retaining the best talent to achieve your growth target. There's no good having a superstar that's looking over their shoulder as to what's the next opportunity. Want to keep those people in the business. But the start of that, of course, is getting good talent on board in the first place. What are you doing? What can we help you with that allows you to attract really top talent into your organization? It's a very, very competitive employee market. If you're looking for a job, there's an awful lot of opportunities for you. Conversely, if you're looking to employ people, the war for talent and the competition has never been so strong. So how you promote yourself as an organization is clearly pretty critical. And again, driving team performance through management leadership training, which of course improves productivity. Again, we'll coach on that, and we're going to talk about that a little bit this morning. So who's on the webinar? There's my happy smiling face. That looks like it's a few years ago. I must update my photograph. I've got the fabulous Rachel Holmes, who's one of our HR directors, also the equally competent and fabulous Victoria Sullivan, and my colleague and opposite number, Regional Director in the Midlands, Joe Ramsdale, are all joining us this morning. So I'm going to stop sharing now for the time being, and I'm going to introduce the guys. Good morning, everybody. How are we doing?
Morning. Very well, Stuart. Thank you.
Good, good.
Morning.
So let's kick off. Let's not hang about here. So the first element of this is developing a people strategy that supports your growth plans. So clearly, most clients, I'm sure people on the webinar this morning, will have a plan of some sort for next year. Some of them might not. But what's the importance of having that people plan that sits alongside that? Why is that important? Rachel, could you give us a bit of a flavour of why you think that's so critical?
Absolutely. So I think, and just taking a step back, where we can help is we actually work with businesses to help them with their strategy. So a lot of businesses have got the strategy, but actually knowing how you're going to get there is an important part of that people plan. So we work with businesses to look at their strategy. Is that where they want to be, whether that's 1 year, 3 year, 5 years? And where we can help is actually providing that cadence on how you actually get there. So what is the journey like? What are the key milestones that you need to make? And part of that is the people plan. And that will be things like organizational design. So how are you going to invest in people? When are you going to invest in people? What's the timeline? What does that future organization look like? And how do we work back from there so that we do recruit at the right time into the right roles? And that means that you're not on the back foot. So you're always in front of where you need to be. You know when to recruit, and you're not over investing at any point. It also helps us to look at you know, what type of people you need in those roles. So can you develop your internal people in order to provide that, so you don't have to go out to recruit? So how do you develop your people towards that strategy? And look at the retention, and that reduces obviously all those costs around people leaving, having to recruit. So developing that internal talent to meet that strategy.
Thanks, Rach. You mentioned about, you know, timelines, and clearly very often when we go into an organisation, there's an awful lot to do as far as the plan's concerned. Victoria, how do you go about making sure that things are done in a timely fashion? I mean, clearly we can't do everything at once. How do you get that plan to work in terms of a sequence?
I think it is really important to not run away with ourselves. I know community businesses invest a lot of time in mission statements and financial goals, and then really work hard to make sure things happen. But I think we have to be quite honest about what the priorities really are, and continuing to sort of meet and discuss that regularly. So meeting with them is really important, so that you can sort of check in and make sure that things are on track and that you don't get sidelined with other things that feel important, but, you know, weren't really on the plan in the first place. So I think that regular communication and the meeting rhythm is really important.
Okay, thank you. Jo, anything to add?
Yeah, I've got quite a good example actually of a client that I worked with recently. They were experiencing very poor retention levels in the organisation, and they've got a relatively young workforce. And the owner of the business was at a loss to understand what they could do to help to reduce that attrition of, you know, what were quite talented people. So I worked with him to develop a structure for the organisation 2 years out, what the business might look like if it actually achieved all of its growth plans. You know, it's aligning that business plan to a people plan. And the outcome of that is that we were able to really share that with the team and help them to understand what future roles they could move into. It also gave them an opportunity to see a really solid career path through the organisation, and actually help them to sort of believe in the future. I think a lot of time, you know, we talk about, oh, we're going to grow and oh, we're going to be this and that and the other. But the fact of the matter is, there's nothing more powerful than seeing it written down on a piece of paper. You know what, guys, at the end of 2023, this is what the organisation will look like if we achieve our results. And actually, there's a place there for you. You know, you are the managers of the future. And the actual result of that was that we went from losing between 10 and 12 people a month, it's quite a big company, to basically reducing that down to one person per month, which was a phenomenal result. And it was all about just giving transparency and showing people a vision of the future. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I have experienced in real life, you know, a people plan and the power of that in actually really retaining talent. And for me, that's why it is so critically important. And if you've only got a small business, the same power is there. You don't have to have a huge company in order for that to be effective.
And you mentioned organisational structure and design there, and I think that's a really important point to perhaps explore in a little bit more detail. You talked about, you know, having a plan to have the structure for the future. Why is that important?
Well, first of all, you need to sort of think about, you know, in the future, what roles will exist in my organisation? You know, you may have plans to diversify into other products or into new services. You may just want to increase the capacity of the current business model. But things are constantly changing, and I think if you can actually see what roles what roles will exist in the future, you can then think about, well, who am I hiring right now? Are the people that I'm hiring, have they got the headspace and the ability to be able to grow and develop into those roles? Are there gaps in my organisation where I really need to start thinking about that? You know, what development does the team need in order for them to be able to sustain that future model? And I think the other thing is it creates a real level of buy-in, of excitement into the vision of the company. You know, we talk about the vision of the future. I think having a really robust structure there and a plan to how we're going to achieve that does excite people, and it makes them feel like it's tangible and real. And what you will then get is, you know, real additional discretionary effort from the workforce as a result of that. Even in the more, you know, junior roles, I think people, once they're engaged and they can see, you know, how they can contribute to that future, they're far more likely to really invest themselves personally into the organisation. So that's why I think it's
okay.
Really important.
Thanks, Jo. That's really useful. For many of our people tuning in perhaps this morning, many of them might not have had access to a people plan or have an understanding of what that might look like. Guys, could you perhaps give us an indication of what a high level people plan might entail, what it might look like, how we might make it happen?
Rachel, do you want to pick up on
that?
Yeah,
so when I go into, after I've done the discovery, I'm really keen to actually put a project plan in place for that business. And the reason I do that is so that the business can see those timescales and what exactly I plan to achieve during that period. Now that may change depending on the business as you go through, because there will be stuff that come up when you're there. But that gives them an overall plan of what we do. And I always start with working with them on their strategy. And even if they have the one, we look at that first so that we can align our people plan to that. And that can exist of anything from, you know, looking at the roles and responsibilities within the organisation. You know, what are we currently doing, but actually where are the gaps? You know, what is it you'd like to do, but you haven't got time to do it, or you haven't got the right people in the right roles to do it. Also looking at all the process and the policies, actually, you know, what do you need for your business, your size of business, and we adapt what we need for that. So the whole employee journey, what does that look like, from recruitment, induction, performance management, and people exiting that business. And we also, you know, we'll also look at one-to-one coaching if necessary and if desired by the business, but we match our requirements to that people plan very much on what that business needs.
I think the people puzzle pinwheel, as we call it, is really helpful in terms of structuring that. So exactly as Rachel says. So we always start with the business strategy in the middle, and then with the transformational, transactional, operational pieces around that, to acknowledge that all those parts are really important. And in my experience, sort of every business has something that we need to look at in each of those areas. I think that's really useful in terms of structuring the plan, and for our clients to see, you know, we talk about this right from the start, and as Rachel says, with the discovery, and then they see it come through in terms of the actions that we feel are important, and the timeframes for delivery.
I often talk about an annual plan, and then I tend to break that down into 90-day sprints. I guess you guys probably do the same, because that gives us sort of a chunk of time in order to which, you know, the sorts of things that we want to achieve within that 90-day period. And I think it gives us an opportunity to, you know, speak to the business owner and say, hey, look, you know, these are the things that we're focusing on now. This is what's going to, you know, the implementation of that's going to happen by the end of this quarter. And then sort of longer term for the year, these are the other things that we want to put in place. Rachel, you mentioned about a project plan, and you know, I'm a massive fan of very simple Gantt charts that give what are we going to do and when are we going to do it. You know, that's a big piece for me. I think it's important to have that visual. I guess you've all worked in businesses where there isn't a plan. What have the consequences of that been where there is no plan?
I mean, you know, I've worked with many clients who don't have a plan in place. And what I often find is that when they reach out to us, they do it because, you know, they've got issues and problems. And those issues and problems usually are a direct result, not really, you know, focusing on the people side of the business as effectively as possibly they could. And I also find generally that, you know, when we start working with businesses, that, you know, for them, they feel that sort of HR is all about, well, can you make my contracts and handbooks better? And actually, you know, when I'm putting together my people plan for an organization, whether it has 10 employees or 1,000, frankly, you know, that's probably the last thing on my mind, unless there are, you know, significant issues, you know, where we can add, you know, what we're looking at with our people plan is, where can we actually add the most value to this organization? What are the goals of the business? You know, where do we need to focus it in order to enable really robust future growth for the organisation? And that usually that usually ends up being a focus on leadership and management development, focus on the skills in the wider organisation, and as we've talked about earlier, really building the right structure. And often people are very surprised when kind of we turn up and start talking about that, and really those sort of fundamental, sort of old-fashioned view of what HR is about. We couldn't be further from that. The way that we do things. We're very much part of, I think, a movement called modern HR, and that's what businesses of the future really need.
So moving on, creating a focused and strong leadership team to deliver those growth plans is clearly pretty critical. So what sort of things, Victoria, do you think are important in terms of addressing that with your clients? I mean, clearly they've got leaders in the business, but how do you get that leadership team cohesive and working together to absolutely deliver the plan?
I think it can be challenging, particularly with family businesses. And I think we go back to a point we've talked about already, which is about structure in the first place. And I've had a lot of conversations with clients about accountability. I think really being very clear on the leadership accountability and getting the structure right. But then actually, I found having quite a lot of honest, repeated conversations about that, about the structure, and making sure that everyone's on the same page. I think that's really powerful. And I think sometimes it gets really frustrating because you do feel like you're repeating yourself in a bit of a broken record. But I think getting everyone on the same page and getting that communication right is really important. And I think sometimes there's a bit of an elephant in the room around capability at a leadership level. And I think that's where that coaching really helps. Again, being quite honest about what's needed, and doing the coaching in the right ways. As I said, with family businesses, it can be tricky. So I think, making some bold decisions around coaching and the structure is really important.
Yeah, and
thank you.
Absolutely, that structure. And I think that then helps when you go into some family businesses. The MD is in every single organisation chart box, and often they want to come out of that and free their time up, but have a team beneath them to be able to support that and move that forward. So I think for me, and where we've been successful is making sure the right people are in the right boxes at that leadership level so that they can run the day-to-day business, and then it gives the headspace to the MD to look forward and to build that business. And we have had that comment about you've freed up my time to be able to do that, but they need to have those right people to delegate to in the first place, and that's what we can help them with.
And I think I think also let's not forget that kind of that middle management level, because often what we find is that when we start to work with organisations, the people at that level generally have achieved that level because they were the best technical experts in the part of the business in which they worked. And you're smiling, Victoria's smiling, because how many times does this happen, Victoria? And you feel terrible for the people because they're doing the best job that they possibly can without ever probably having any management or leadership training to go alongside that particular role. But people do leave managers, they don't really leave companies. And therefore, I think that, taking seriously the development of those people is absolutely critical to ensuring that the senior leadership team isn't constantly sort of having to operate at a lower level because they're having to make up for the lack of skills and abilities in that middle management team. I think that's probably something you found as well, Victoria.
Definitely. And I was going to say, I know I hear the phrase general manager a lot, which is the term that's used a lot for that MD role. But it is that point about please don't take general manager to mean I've generally got to be across everything, because I completely agree with Jo, that the technical people in those team leader management positions doing a great technical job, and then the general manager is over them, sort of helping to manage the team. I just think creates quite a lot of confusion, inefficiency, and getting that clarity, I think, is really, really important.
I've had an interesting question just come through on the chat, and I guess we'll try to answer some of these if we can. There was a question around aligning shareholder aspirations. How have you dealt with that? We talked about family businesses, and what the organisation is trying to achieve from a family perspective. So how have you engaged those stakeholders and got them aligned to what the ultimate goal is? Victoria.
I think recognizing that again, this is particularly around family businesses where we've got shareholders who are not directly in the business, or actually those that are. I think it's acknowledging that they need information, they need to understand the longer term vision of the organisation, and we're back to things that we've talked about already in terms of having that clear picture for the business strategy, not just the mission statement and the financial goals, and having conversations with all the stakeholders, and not trying to sort of roll those conversations into maybe other more operational conversations. Certainly in my experience, we're trying to kill several birds with one stone with meetings sometimes. So I think getting that clarity about what they need to know, the opportunity to challenge the strategy and the goals of the organisation can be a really powerful way to align them to where the organisation is trying to go.
Yeah,
I know that every organisation that I've worked with, community organisation I've worked with, we've designed and delivered some sort of leadership and management workshop, and I guess you guys are exactly the same. Is there any time that you haven't done that?
Oh, I think that generally, I suppose if there isn't a necessity to help to support leadership and management development, then the organisation probably doesn't need us.
Yeah.
If the truth be told, but I've yet to find one where the owner of the business is 100% satisfied with the leadership and management skills and abilities in the organisation. There's always room for all of us to grow and develop. We're learning till the very end, and generally, I've found in my experience that it's absolutely critical to get that very senior team aligned, which often, as Victoria's mentioned, is a family group. They're very well. They need to get that alignment, because without that, the rest of the organisation can't come behind them, and really support that alignment. If they see dysfunction or disagreement within that top team, then that has a direct impact on the rest of the organisation.
Filters down. Yeah.
It filters down, and I could sit here and say otherwise, but that's the absolute truth, is that it will filter through to the rest of the people in the organisation, and have somewhat negative impact on them. So for us, is getting that senior group really aligned, positive, and working well. It is critical. It's critical to the rest of the formula.
That decision making, I think, because people will go to the person that they get the decision they want from, rather than actually the right decision. And so actually, when you're doing that with that leadership structure, I think where we can help is where, what do the board or what that leadership team talk about? What's the purpose of those meetings? What do they want the outcome to be? And actually at the management level, what are they talking about? What are the reasons for the meetings? What's the purpose? What are the outcomes? And so everybody, that making that visible, so people need to know where to go to get the answers that they require, is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So we've got some questions coming in, and I'm keen to move on a little bit, because we're just coming up to 8:30, and we've got a little bit more to cover. We'll try and cover those questions if we can, but it might not be possible for us to do that. So let's talk about talent. Okay, attracting, retaining, developing talent. I mean, we've already said that recruiting is tough for everybody at the moment. No one's denying that. But what sort of things have you seen happening in the job market that might be relevant to our audience this morning? Rachel.
Yeah, I think with the job market, obviously we're quite a few people down on warehouse positions, distribution. A lot of Eastern Europeans have gone back to Eastern Europe, so there is a lot harder to recruit, without a doubt. People aren't coming through agencies are having to go and get people. So the whole, it's definitely an employee market, as you mentioned earlier, Stuart. So what we're helping the organisations to do is, the first thing is, don't just replace what you've lost without even thinking about it. There is a tendency to do that, and actually look at the role. What do you really need for this role going forward? what is it you can do as an employer? And man, actually, you know, carrying out exit interviews of those people leaving first is the sort of first point. So what can you do as an employer? What is your employee value proposition? Why should people apply for a job with you? What is it about your company that stands you out from the rest in your local community? How are you going to attract people in that area? And I think you need to look at that competitiveness. You need to know what's going around in that market before you start recruitment. It is a lot more difficult. And actually, it's about making that program on recruitment a really robust program so that you are getting that right person in. But actually, I think there's a lot of stages people can do before they go into recruitment. And that's about looking internally about your current employees, what skills they've got, what development you could give them in order to, you know, reduce your recruitment costs and not have to go externally if you don't have to. But again, that's all down to your people plan and making sure you're doing that in a timely manner. So you're not on the back foot thinking someone's left, we've got to recruit someone and we do it in a rush, really.
Yeah, Victoria, what your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I've had experience recently where we've had to do 2 rounds of recruitment process for an operations manager vacancy that we've had, and I would absolutely agree with Rachel. It's definitely a candidate-driven market, and there's quite a lot of uncertainty. But I think as HR directors, it kind of heightens what we already know. Exactly what Rachel said. We've got to be really clear on what it is that we're hiring for and sort of how we can attract the best people. Had some interesting conversations with somebody in the organisation recently who's very keen to progress, but almost wasn't clear about what they wanted to do. And so really great conversations about, we'd love to retain this person. They get the culture, they really can contribute to the organisation. But, you know, don't just go after the current vacancy that's been advertised. So it's opposite challenges, you know, finding it hard to attract external people, but then also, as Rachel's indicated, you know, looking at our internal talent and managing that really well. But I think it just, you know, we do know this stuff. We have experience and knowledge in this area. It's just heightened what we know and has really made us think about how to make a difference in organisations in some quite tricky times.
Jo, I know you've had a lot to do with this. What does great talent management look like? Because attracting people is one thing, but, you know, managing the people internally and developing them is something entirely different. What does that look like?
You know, I think that, well, we know that obviously the millennial generation is going to make up about, I think it's about 70% of the workforce by 2025. And, you know, we need to be really cognizant of that and understand what they require, what those talented people require from us as employers. And those critical areas are that they want, you know, regular, open and honest feedback about how they're doing. They have choice because, you know, they're skilled and talented. They have choice about which employer they can work for. They're looking for employers that I think have got a strong employer brand. They can compare one employer to another. Everything's out there on social media now, and believe me, they will do their homework before they apply for a role with you, and they can find out all sorts about your business from social media that perhaps you might not realize. So having a really strong employer brand, I think, is the number one most important thing. A brand that they want to align with and that they can be proud to work for. And secondly, you know, thinking about your employee value proposition. What is it that you're going to offer those talented people that's going to help to, you know, really encourage them not only to join your organisation, but then to stay with you? Because if they're any good, they will be getting calls from headhunters and other recruiters, you know, relatively frequently. And, you know, I guess, you know, our job isn't to get exasperated about that, but to understand that that is just the way the market works. And if we can have, you know, a really good EVP that works well to those employees, then we can continue to develop and retain them. And I suppose my last point is that actually, you know, this comes back round full circle to the quality and skills of the leadership and management team. The leadership and management team are strong, the talent will stay. And if they are not, then the talent will leave them for better leadership and management. And ultimately, you know, that's just the nature of how this works. And often businesses, you know, don't think about their employer brand and EVP probably as often as they should, and really work on that effectively, because that's the foundations upon which everything else is built. And obviously, that's an area, that's a really strong area of expertise, I think, within all of us within People Puzzles.
Yeah, it's interesting because Rachel earlier on mentioned that people don't leave employers, they leave managers. So that, the quality of the leader, the quality of the manager is pretty critical. I also read recently, I think it was a LinkedIn survey, that 88% of employees are disengaged from what they're doing. So the whole engagement piece around, why are we doing this? What's my role? And, how am I going to be rewarded long term for sticking with X employer is part of that plan. I know when I work with clients, I'm really keen for everyone to have their own personal development plan that increases their skills and gives them some objectives for that year so that they can feel like they're really achieving things. Cool. Let's move on slightly then. So last part we had was coaching managers to drive team performance, improve productivity, and achieve targets. I mean, that's a pretty big piece on its own, but we all know that these are areas that everybody focuses on or should be focusing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. Ultimately, we want some KPIs in place. We want to hold people accountable, and we want to drive performance from individuals. So, Rachel, what have you put in place to make that happen?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we first of all set out the expectations for employees. So where people aren't performing, do they really know what's required of them? And actually, have we given them feedback already? So often we talk about, giving them feedback on their performance, but it's also about giving them feedback on behavior. So, I've got examples of where people you've been doing the job for 10 years, brilliant at their job, but actually their behavior isn't aligned to the cultures of that business. So actually, how do you tackle that? And I think what's important, that actually tell that employee what you do expect of them in the first place, and then you manage that through with them and regularly review that performance. One, I think you should give feedback when it happens. So you shouldn't be waiting for your one-to-ones or your appraisals and that type of thing to give them that. That shouldn't be a surprise. They should know where they are at any point. And we help the managers with those conversations. So we'll sit in and we'll drive those conversations forward and then work with them to review them on a regular basis. And then you see the people change or not, as the case may be, but you'll see them improve through that process because they actually know what's expected of them. And that's half the battle, is making sure you have that in the first place. But if they don't improve, then we're there to take the managers through what happens if that person still doesn't perform, that capability, and making sure that we're giving them all the development they need. But if not, how do we move that person out of that position and take them forward?
So Victoria, what have you encountered that are the biggest barriers to managing performance in a community business? What have you noticed in your experience?
I think, well, like a lot of managers and leaders, I think there's a fear of conflict and having the tricky conversation. And I think, worrying that if we say the wrong thing, there'll be quite negative consequences. And I think even highly capable leaders worry about that. So I think, to go to Rachel's point, that structured approach to give everyone confidence that we know, again, whatever that process looks like, we call it appraisals, we call it one-to-ones or whatever. But I think getting that structure in place is really important so that we know that we can overcome that fear of conflict. I think also one of the challenges is we talk a lot about KPIs and sort of how we are going to measure whether someone's successful. And I think, again, an honest conversation about meaningful KPIs. So what gets measured gets done. So if we pick something and we measure it, everybody focuses on it. But we've got to have the right thing, and it's got to be meaningful to the business. It's got to be meaningful to the individual if it can be. And that really helps structure that conversation to get that buy-in and to have a quality conversation on a regular basis.
So Jo, what's your top tips for getting the best out of the team and individuals? We've covered some of this already, but have you got anything you'd like to add?
Well, I find that using the 9-box grid is very useful. And the reason, for those who don't know what the 9-box grid is, I guess that's a conversation for later if anybody wants to ring me and ask me about that. But it's basically a way of measuring how people are performing in the organisation. And the reason that that's a very powerful tool is what it does is it actually takes the conversation away from the individual and just focuses on the behaviours and focuses on the performance. So then it very much becomes an objective performance related conversation, so people can understand where they currently sit in terms of their skills and abilities and their kind of attitude towards the role, and what needs to happen in order for them to sort of build on that and improve their performance. And often I find that if you've got people who are, really poor performers, and you sit with them and you sort of talk them through that 9-box grid and then explain to them where they sit, that it is exceptionally powerful in getting people to become more self-aware. And then either, let's be frank here, if you've got somebody who isn't performing and you don't want them in the company any longer, then there has to be a mechanism for you to be able to deal with that. And we have so many tools and the tricks of the trade in order to enable that and support to enable that to happen. But equally to also ensure that people who are, genuinely hardworking and just want to develop and improve have the opportunity to do so. So for me, I think using those powerful tools is a way of ensuring that we do reduce conflict, that people can enter conversations about performance without feeling, oh, this is going to be really scary, and are we going to start getting into a fight about this? And that they don't feel that it's an unpalatable sort of meeting. We want people to look forward to those meetings. It's actually a really great meeting to talk about performance, because hopefully most of the time it's all positive strokes.
Yeah, and I think what it really does is help people, where they see people not performing, that we're at the management leadership are actually doing something about that. So it helps with retention of other staff as well, because they can see that person's being supported, or they're having those robust conversations. And that calibration on that 9-box grid can happen across that leadership team. So it just makes that, as Joe said, makes it a lot more objective rather than just you and that individual. So that really helps.
Definitely, and clearly coaching middle managers or business leaders to have those challenging conversations without fear of conflict is absolutely part of the journey. And I guess that comes back to the developing leaders and developing managers to be more skillful with managing the performance in their team. So for those that are tuning in, we do have a 1-page flyer that we're going to send out with a recording and the slides from the webinar, which gives a simple process for conducting a one-to-one review with your team. Going back to the talent question, we've also got a 10-step process for recruiting talent and retaining people in your organization. Again, we can support that you with that if necessary. One thing we haven't really covered on is getting the leadership team aligned and then agreeing a rhythm of meetings so that they can track their progress. And again, we've put something together that we'll send out following the end of the webinar that gives you an opportunity to look at getting that meeting rhythm in place. By my reckoning, we've got 2 minutes left, so we seem to we could talk about this stuff all day long, couldn't we?
That's what we do, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just have a look at a couple of questions here, and I'm sorry to those that have submitted questions that we may not be able to answer. Let's have a look at what we've got. Crikey, there's so many here. I don't know where to start. So there's one here that says, does the People Plus team have experience of the financial aspect of the people plan? One challenge in growing business is often, what point can we afford to bring more people on? This point can be different to when we actually need someone else coming on board. Yeah, I think that's a great question. There's 2 things here. One is that all of our HR directors aren't just great people. They've got commercial acumen, and that's why they're on our team. We've got some brilliant people that really understand business transformation, and that includes the financial aspects. But importantly, we partner with the FD Centre. They're part of our overall group, the Liberty Group, and anything that we can't support with, we can certainly call on their expertise. But we've got direct business experience ourselves. Many of us have worked at either very senior levels or run our own businesses, so we can certainly support you with that. But if we're in hot water, as you might be, then we would call in the experts, clearly. I've got another one here. How do I cope with a manager who is really very capable in most areas? One may be good at lots of things, but is challenging when they have a finger in everything. get them an accurate job description, make them accountable for something specific. I would say that would be really important. I don't think we've got time to answer any more questions, and I'm sorry about that. But what I'd like to do, if it's okay, is just to finish up by sharing my screen and allowing us to just say to you, hopefully we're on this now, is to say, if there are any questions that we've not been able to answer for you, we just want to say thank you very much for tuning in. We've enjoyed ourselves. We could go forever. There is a complimentary 30-minute discovery call. So if you'd like to get 2022 off with a bang, then we would certainly be able to help you with that. But if you'd like us to have a conversation with you, there's a complimentary 30-minute call. Just call us, email us, and a local regional director will be in touch with you. Thank you again for joining us. We hope you found that useful. We've certainly enjoyed ourselves, and we've got a day's work to look forward to as well. So thank you very much, and hope to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.